Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. Momentarily, I will be joined by Rhonda Parker Taylor. We will be discussing authoring novels. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Rhonda, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. Like you said, my name is Rhonda Parker Taylor. Although the topic is authoring a novel, I also have an HR and staffing and leadership background. So I'm sure you'll see some of that in our conversation. I'm from Indiana, and I do coaching and development as a career path. But then as I prepared myself and defined myself, I also took on authoring. I found that my weakness in life was writing. Out of all the disciplines that I had, and even though academically I was successful, I knew I needed to accomplish, and it was an internal goal, which was publishing my first best-selling novel. Everybody thought I was crazy, especially with my history of that being my weakness, but I found that I had to be a life learner. And that meant taking on my weaknesses and challenging myself to be the best version of myself, for my peers that I work with, my family, and even just for, the ability of doing it, the excitement of accomplishing something that I was never destined to do. So I hope that as we discuss things today, that we, not only will we focus on the academic part of things and learning, but learning how it's not always just in college. Yes, I have a doctorate in business, but for me, the things that I learn most in is from learning from others and learning from evaluating myself.
I have over 100 peer review publications. Master's thesis was published. My doctorate was published. And then there are articles and reviews and what are called notes. And then when I left academia and started my own business, I wrote I think it's four. Yeah, I know it's four self-published books.
Okay, good.
And one was a textbook for my students because I hated to write on the board with chalk because I didn't like I don't like chalk. And when we got a whiteboard and the pens, you would think that in today's day and age that they could make a pen that didn't stink to high heaven. So right. I figured it was easier just to have a textbook. Students would buy it, so I put that off to the side. So there are 3 self-published books. Now, what self-published means is that I had the books printed, bound, and made into an ebook. They were not published. Right. They were printed. And the 3, other than the textbook, were all bestsellers. One was a number 4. The first one was a number 4 national bestseller. The other 2 were national number 1 bestsellers. And one of them was also a number 1 international bestseller. I say that only because I want you to understand that I get the academic writing. That's what I do. But I cannot write fiction to save my life. So how were you able to transfer the skills for writing nonfiction to writing fiction?
So I think the key for me is I love people, first of all. Storytelling is the biggest part of it. Is there a story that you want to convey to people? But then I used my academic writing experience to help me write my book by researching. So I use, like, for instance, I knew what story was. So I, sketched out a general outline of what I wanted to say, even though the characters took over and the ending ended up changing. I developed my characters. And how I did it is I did it from an academic and a medical standpoint. So when you go into a doctor, they sit there and they say, okay, what's your complaint? And you say, it's my throat. And then they say, okay, what's happening? And then they have you go through every system of your body. And then they write what they actually see. So what your impression of it may be different than what they see. And then they also write things like dressed appropriate for the weather, not dressed appropriate for the weather, has a flat effect in the face, which means no emotion. And so I took that approach to get to know my characters. What was their family history of medical and mental illness, and for their family. And then by then I knew my characters, just like you would know a leadership theory. And then when you sit down to write, and then let's say you get to a specific point and someone's there, and maybe it's a crowd, if someone's normally isn't appropriate for the weather, that they're going to be dressed inappropriately, or they're going to, they're going to stick out for some kind of odd behavior. If they have anxiety, for instance, and their heart's going to palpitate, when there's, a tension or a thrill, because I write suspense. So when you get to the storytelling, then everything. So the only real difference is you're describing the characters, but you do it the same way as you would a leadership theory, or if you're analyzing an organization, the features of the organization, you're describing it in different ways. So I took that same analytical approach in writing the novel so that it was believable. So my thoughts originally was I wanted to show how the justice system is unfair sometimes, and how it brings together people that normally wouldn't be brought together, whether it be in the jury room or in the courtroom. These are normal, everyday people. You have a judge, you have a lawyer, and you got the prosecutor, the defense, and then you've got the perpetrator, and then you've got the victim, and then you got the families of both, and then in the back room you have the mother that's glad to be out of the house from the kids, and then you've got the professional that tries to get out of jury duty because they're a workaholic and they need to be there thriving. And so you have all these people in one room together, and they're having to function. So there are winners and losers in that process, but it's not necessarily the winners and losers that you think you would like to happen, because really there is no winner at all. Even though maybe the victims' families may get some kind of retribution, you clearly can see that there is no good in the whole experience when it comes to that. So I thought that that's where I was going to be, and I had gotten the idea from watching courtrooms in a crime watch and court and justice system watch system that I was volunteering for. And all of a sudden the characters just took over. When you get to know them, then you're all like, oh, this is someone's weakness, and it took off, and then this happens. and all of a sudden they had their own ending in mind. So what I'm hoping people find when they're reading it is it's about real people. Many times when you read suspense, it's almost fantasy, because it's so extreme. And this is just the subtle, nuances of how things change with every action someone does. So in the case of, for instance, Billy in the novel, which most people haven't read it yet, he's having to face the fact that he's got to be a witness against a friend that he's known all his entire life. And he's sitting there wondering if he's going to take the fifth, or is he going to honor his plea agreement to turn against this other young man that he's known all his life. And then he knows what happens on the other end of this decision, and that is if he rats on his friend, he's going to be, he still has to spend some time in jail or in prison, but then he's known as a rat. And so but if he doesn't, if he doesn't do what he's agreed to do, and he does, or if he does and he's a rat, he also puts the rest of his family in jeopardy because he can't be out there to protect them. So it takes each person's decision. Same thing with the workaholic that's in the jury, and she's a foreman. She doesn't want to be there. She wants to be at work. But she's seeing these things, and she's realizing there's things in her life that are out of balance, that she, and that's the next novel or next book that's coming out, and it should be in the end of this month. It's a workbook on how do you achieve life balance. And I'm not just talking about your career goals. How do you do it for your health? How do you do it for your relationships? How do you do it for your finances? It takes all the characters that are in the book, and it says, okay, here's a case study for what you've read. If you identified with life balance issues, then here is how you should approach changing your life so that you can get full fulfillment.
So what I'm hearing is that I've read historical novels, some of which are accurate, some of which are not all that accurate. But there's what do you call it? The author takes some privileges,
right,
with the facts to shape the story. Now, for suspense, the only thing I have ever read that I can think of is Sherlock Holmes.
right.
And I'm a little embarrassed to admit, but I knew there was a quote from Sherlock Holmes. And when I went to the Encyclopedia Britannica and opened it up to Sherlock Holmes, I was shocked to find that he was a fictitious character. I always thought that Conan Doyle was really Watson. But anyways, not important. You're using the skills you learned in academia to research fictional characters that you've created.
Right.
And then you develop a story, letting the characters build to a conclusion that may be totally different, and probably is, based on what you've said, from what you originally thought. So the characters take over the book.
And when you think about it, that's what you're supposed to do in academia. You're supposed to have a hypothesis.
Oh, of course. You have to have both sides of
right. And then it ends up wherever.
I have an article that was published many, many years ago in the Netherlands International Law Review. I would say that 60% of it is footnotes, where I am arguing with the thesis that I'm presenting.
Right.
And that's why it was published by a peer review journal, because I showed both sides. So I get that. And it may be a topic for the future to come back and discuss work-life balance, because that's a popular topic today, and I'm sure it will always be. But in any case, one of the problems, which we've never discussed this, but I know you had, because all doctoral candidates have it when they're writing their dissertation, is finding it within themselves to stop reading footnotes. That you can't, you've got enough. Enough's enough, you have to stop.
Right.
You can't read any other footnotes, because if you read footnotes, then you're going to go to and read another book and if for another article, and that's just going to add on, and you're never going to finish. So how do you finish the book? When do you say enough is enough and the characters have developed fully and it's time to end this?
So in the case of Crossroads, which is the suspense novel you're talking about, the story was told. The meaning was presented. So my final meaning that I wanted to leave, I wanted something proverbial, literally, where people can stop and think about their own lives, not just about life balance and everything. Is anger is cruel, which a lot of crimes are done in anger. Fury is overwhelming, which when you think of someone's furious, what is their, the outcome? Typically it's a total chaos. But who can stand before jealousy? Envy makes the bones rot, and that's actually in Proverbs. So when I got to that point that got my main thought of everything that you see in those in the motivations for people in a courtroom, and then it's up to me to, as the writer, to describe and to present which one of those cases is the cause of the crime. And I don't want to be the spoiler, so I won't tell you which one it is. But when you think about all three of those, all of them have an impact on us when we're running around angry all the time. And we've all been there before, for whatever reason, there's something that's just angered you. You do things that are out of character for yourself when you're in fury mode, because, fury is more personal than just anger. Anybody can anger you, but when you're in fury, usually there's an emotional attachment to what's going on there. And then envy, when you think of envy, we're bombarded today with, I want someone else, what someone else has. I want to be someone else. I want to look like someone else. I want to act like someone else. And it literally takes away from our own lives. So in the book, there's all three of those emotions that drop little clues throughout the whole book, like an Agatha Christie kind of, or Sherlock Holmes. It's not like a King book where the description's overwhelming. It's more about the story. So I knew that this topic was done when I had approached all three of those emotions, and the character had taken over, and they had committed their flaw, and then it was time for the police to arrive for that crime. So that was, but then but I'm not done, because there's 4 more of them.
All right.
And each character has their own.
Now, one of the things, again, going back to academia, that is very helpful, is that you have the ability to present your research to your peers.
Basically.
And they will cut you to, if you're lucky, they'll cut you to shreds. because they think the work is worthwhile and they want to help you to improve on it. If you are unfortunate, they'll just sit there like bumps on the log and won't say anything because they don't think your research is worth anything. You'll get good questions. They'll give you something to think about. It will help to advance and to raise the level of your work. Your books, were they published by a traditional author? I'm sorry, a traditional publisher? Or were they self-published?
Okay, so I chose a blended version of that. So when I went to publish it, there, you send out the query letters. I had a traditional publisher that was interested. It looked like it was going to be about 2 years, 3 years before it came out. I'm like, I'm getting old.
No, this isn't meant as a criticism.
Yeah.
I said I have 4 self-published books,
That-
and
no,
I did it because I didn't
wait.
want to wait.
Yeah.
So your books, if I'm understanding you correctly, is you didn't go through a peer review process.
No.
So how did you, if you did,
Right.
how were you able to benefit from the reaction to people who you respect? Did you show them the book,
Yeah.
the manuscripts to get feedback?
So the first step in that peer reviewed for me was I did use beta readers that I trusted. Then I like I'd said, I didn't end up going the traditional route. I went a blended, but the blended route is both traditional and self. What that means is you're still considered a self, but they provide you the editor, they provide you marketing.
No. I understand that.
So then so
And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Self-publishing goes back to Benjamin Franklin. And I'm not getting into a fight with Benjamin Franklin.
So then and then I found that the conferences helped, because if you could find a good conference, the one, believe it or not, wasn't even my genre that I went to. I was invited to the Magnolias, and it was a romance writers Atlanta. And I thought, you know what, I'll go. They'll give me a chance to kind of see, what's out there, what they're talking about. And I also did the Midwest Writers Conference, and it gave me more working knowledge. My point, I think, is that it's important, if a person wants to write, that you're able to take criticism. And take
your book to based on what you said, to psychologists, psychiatrists, police officers, criminal attorneys, defense or prosecutors, to make sure that what you were saying was accurate?
I did both, let them read it, and I followed them around. And so, like, I was even, one of the things that I know I've had a lot of comments about is the officers' dialogue. Some people have been particularly kind in their reviews about it and said that they enjoyed it. And so I had signed up to ride with the police in Indianapolis, and they actually assigned me a suburb, which is Carmel. So I never saw a murder scene, but I did get to see like accidents and just different kinds of calls that they were called to. And it gave me a sense of the isolation that officers sometimes have to go through, and the fact that they are literally a team, but at the same time, it's more like a football team where they can only provide their physical presence. They can't help their, rookies learn how to psychologically deal with it. They can't. And so it's kind of a banter, like you would hear men in on a football team doing, like at practice, where they're going back and forth. For the autopsy, obviously I couldn't watch one, so I was able to get books on how they do autopsies and how they do that. And then I was able to allow people to read it. So yeah, I sent sections to different people. And then some, I did the best I could do with the knowledge that I had.
Understood. I'm going to share your contact information with our viewers, and I will make us magically appear. And I have one final question for you. Is there anything I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
I think of course, I always want people to ask about the book, but I think that if I wanted to leave your audience with any kind of last minute thought, and with you being in staffing and understanding the needs of people, go with your purpose. You will always be more happy with your life and more satisfied if you do that. For me, writing is a joy. It's something that I can look forward to doing, and that takes me out of the day to day, just like reading a book. So I would love everybody in the audience to really kind of think about those three emotions and try to eliminate them from your life so that you can be more kind to yourself. Other than that, if anybody wants to know how to get a copy of Crossroads, you can find it, in many of the Barnes and Noble stores, or you can go on Amazon and buy it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble's website. It's Crossroads by Rhonda Parker Taylor.
Rhonda, thank you very much. I have especially found this interesting. So I
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time, and I'm sure viewers do as well.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And I'd love to come back.
My pleasure. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.